you look back in 2008, the black voters, they cast 56% of all the early in-person ballots, that according to the Columbus Dispatch. So the perception can become very difficult, and people might say this is disproportionately affecting minorities.
Well, let's understand those last 3 days. That's out of my hands. That's in state law.
State law passed by the Republican legislature in Ohio, signed into law by the Republican governor since the last election. That was my colleague Richard Louie with Ohio Secretary of State John Husted this morning, pointing out that in 2008, a majority of African-American voters in Cuyahoga County, which is where Cleveland is, voted early, in person, on the weekends prior to the election. Yesterday, Secretary of State John Husted announced that all 88 counties in Ohio would have the same hours for early voting. There will be some moderately extended hours beyond business hours during the week, but there will be no voting on weekends at all. Joining us now for the interview is Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. He is running for election this year. His opponent is a man named Josh Mandel. Senator Brown, thanks for being here. It's nice to see you.
Good to be back. Thanks, Rachel.
The Secretary of State in Ohio said he imposed these new rules because he wants to level the playing field. Do you think he has succeeded in that? Do you think that everybody has equal access to the polls now in Ohio?
No, he was, he acts like that's a nod to good government by taking away the advantages that overwhelmingly white, suburban, upper, more higher income Republican counties have. But what he's done is, it's happening on both ends. We're seeing, on the one hand, billionaires put huge amounts of money into political campaigns, overwhelmingly on the Republican side. They want tax breaks. They want weaker environmental laws. They want more Wall Street involvement in government instead of less. And on the other end, they're tightening up voter rules to the point of keeping people away from the polls. Well, what you pointed out at the beginning of this show, or the beginning of this segment, Rachel, was after 2004, even Republicans in Ohio and Ken Black were embarrassed about what Ken Blackwell did, the Secretary of State in those days. And they bipartisanly, they were in the majority, Democrats assisted them in this, set up early voting and made it much more accessible. So they basically are rolling back reforms they made. And in no time, really, in our lifetimes, have we seen us go backwards on access to the ballot. And this is just morally reprehensible to allow more and more big money on one end and shut people down on the other end that would like to vote early.
What explains, in your mind, that abandonment of that consensus that we used to have in this country about the expansion of voting rights, about the idea that partisanship didn't have a role in the administration of elections? Obviously, there's been crooked elections officials here and there throughout American history, but in recent history, we all used to think that we were all sort of pulling in the same direction, particularly after there'd been some national embarrassments. How did it change so fast and go so far?
I think they feel so threatened by Barack Obama, so threatened the far right and some of their large corporate interests, particularly Wall Street and the oil industry, feel so threatened by Democrats winning by Barack Obama that they are willing to change the rules. And the rules on campaign finance were pretty much agreed to. Full disclosure, put limits on try to ban outside money, put limits on what people were contributing, on voter laws, make them more accessible as long as we did them fairly and honestly and transparently. On both ends of that, they've really betrayed they betrayed the national interest and betrayed our values of what we stand for as a country. They've also really undermined their own agreed to reforms of less than a decade ago, and they should be ashamed of themselves for that.
Ohio voting rules and access to the polls is obviously critical, dead critical for your reelection effort in this campaign, also for the president's reelection effort. Ohio, as always, an incredibly important part of the campaign. But one of the things that we're seeing nationwide, and particularly in all of the swing states, is that Democratic voter registration efforts are not keeping pace with Republican voter registration efforts this year. We've had a couple of pieces of new data this week that says that however much concern Democrats are expressing about this, Republicans are registering more voters since the last election. What do you think about that, and does it apply in Ohio?
Well, I don't see that in Ohio. I've heard some of those stories outside Ohio. We had such momentum last year from issue 2, the collective bargaining collective bargaining bill on the ballot, the first time in American history when collective bargaining rights were actually put on a statewide ballot. We won with 61% of the vote, beating back the efforts to take away collective bargaining rights. So, yeah, we have some momentum that way. I think that will continue, but it's all about organizing. I mean, I asked people in your show before to come to SherrodBrown.com, sign up to help us fight back on the big money in these campaigns, to help us fight back on Citizens United, to help us organize. And that really is a key to winning to winning for the president and for my reelection.
Senator Sherrod Brown, Democrat of Ohio. Thanks for your time tonight, sir. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right. You remember that old Ronald Reagan saying, trust but verify? That old saying got a workout today. Please stay with us. More ahead.